Good evening. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the Power of the Magazine cover yesterday, today, and tomorrow featuring Dr. Samir Husni. It is my delight also to introduce Lisa Kressel, who will introduce our guest speaker. Lisa is publisher and editor of The Advocate, a community magazine which covers 4 separate prominent Dallas area neighborhoods: Lakewood, East Dallas, Preston Hollow, Oak Cliff, and Lake Highlands. And I'd like to thank especially board member Bob Mong for making this connection to Lisa as we brainstormed last fall about different types of dynamic programming to complement the exhibit behind you, 55 Years, where we showcase 57 magazines of President Kennedy's image from 1963 to the present. Lisa suggested that we reach out to Mr. Magazine, and here we are tonight. As publisher and editor of 4 monthly Advocate magazines, Lisa supervises journalists who produce the print and digital publications. The distribution is made up of 94,000 copies circulated directly to homes and 375,000 online readers every month. I'm not a math major, obviously. Previously, as deputy managing editor of Lifestyles at the Dallas Morning News, Lisa supervised the features and art section, as well as GuideLive.com. In addition, she was newsroom liaison for marketing and research on audience and readership. Lisa also spearheaded the reinvention of the feature sections several times and led the department's transition to an integrated online newsroom. She participated on the Knight-sponsored table stakes team to transform newsrooms to digital-first operations and served on A.H. Belo's Innovation Council, a cross-departmental team that developed and reviewed new product ideas. Lisa has been a leader in developing new products for niche audiences, including Healthy Living, FD, a lucrative fashion magazine, and Salou, an annual wine and food glossy magazine. She also worked on the launch team for Quick, the Dallas area's tabloid news product for young readers. Under her leadership, the Lifestyles department won numerous national awards, and her sections were named as one of the top 5 featured sections in the large circulation division in the American Association of Sunday and Features Editors Best Section contests several times. She is passionate about narrative writing, and she also spent a year and a half in the Czech Republic. She is a graduate of the University of Florida, where she majored in magazine journalism and minored in French. Lisa was also a 2010 fellow in the Punch Salzberger Executive Leadership Program at Columbia University School of Journalism, and she has served as Pulitzer Prize juror in the criticism category in 2010 and as criticism juror chair in 2011. Now, we're in for a ride tonight, and Lisa is going to be handling also the Q&A afterwards. So please join me in welcoming Lisa Kressel to the table.
Hello, I'm Lisa Kressel, editor and publisher of The Advocate magazines, and I'm so happy to be here. I was really thrilled to meet Dr. Husni again for the second time. In the early 2000s, he consulted with us at the Dallas Morning News about how to do magazines. And earlier tonight, I found out that we shared the exact same mentor. When he was at UNT, he had a professor, Mr. Benton Patterson, who was my mentor at University of Florida in magazine journalism, and I can't believe it's such a small world that we both had the same professor. So I'm really thrilled to find that out tonight. Dr. Samir Husni, aka Mr. Magazine, fell in love with print when he was an 8-year-old in Lebanon, and someone gave him a Superman comic book. He then did what any great magazine editor would do as a boy, and he proceeded to create a magazine for his school, his Boy Scout troop, and his Sunday school class. When it came time for college, Mr. Magazine almost became Mr. Dentist. Thankfully, he had the courage to tell his parents that he much preferred magazines over molars. Now Dr. Husni is the country's leading magazine expert and the nation's leading authority on new magazine, according to Forbes. He is founder and director of the Magazine Innovation Center at the University of Mississippi's Meek School of Journalism and New Media. He received his doctorate in journalism from the University of Missouri and his master's degree from the University of North Texas. He is the author of 28 annuals, Samir Husni's Guide to Magazines. He's documented the contemporary magazine scene for 25 years. He has collected 30,000 first edition magazines, which he houses in 6 storage units, if you can imagine. So he's very passionate about magazines. In spite of the industry upheaval and the question about what's going to happen to print journalism, and with all of the questions about digital media, he is a passionate advocate for print. Mr. Magazine celebrated his 66th birthday recently, like any passionate magazine collector would. He collected 66 magazines from the month he was born. And if you want to Google it on YouTube, you can see him talk about that. Anyway, I'm really pleased to present Mr. Magazine, Dr. Samir Husni, on the power of the magazine cover.
Being here, it's great to see that the front row has been filled. It's really great being here. It's even greater, touring the museum today. As a young kid, I was 10 years old when President Kennedy was assassinated. November 22nd is the Independence Day of Lebanon. And so we were watching. That's the only day our parents let us stay late. And with the 8-hour difference, so 1:30 here was 9:30 in Lebanon. And we had this big festivities. The leading country's singer, and it's like the Barbra Streisand of the Middle East. And all of a sudden, as we were watching, the anchorman, Camille Monessa, just like running through the stage, grabbing the mic from the singer, and announcing that President Kennedy has been assassinated. For some of you who are not familiar with Lebanon, the majority of the Christians in Lebanon are Catholic. So President Kennedy was to them as the closest thing to the Pope, to Catholics. And so it was, we've seen all the newsreels during you go to a movie theater and here's the newsreel about President Kennedy. It was like more people had in their homes pictures of President Kennedy than the president of Lebanon. It was that important to the Lebanese. So I still see that evening, watching that take place, and then walking through the museum earlier this afternoon, it was like, wow. It was such an amazing experience that to me leads to my presentation about the importance of being experience makers in our business rather than just content providers. Anybody in today's day and age can provide you with content. Can we change that content to an experience-making approach? And so tonight, as Lisa, thanks for the introduction, and I'm glad that we shared so many of the backgrounds. That keeps me young and alive, and I challenge everybody. That's the best thing you can do to yourself. Go to eBay, find all these magazines from the month you were born, buy as many as you can, and if you are 85, buy 85 of them. If you are 65, buy 65 of them. It gives you a feeling of how the world was when you were born, and it's a permanent thing. So today we are going to talk about print in a digital age and the role of the cover. In 2009, I stepped down as the chair of the journalism department at the University of Mississippi to start the Magazine Innovation Center. I founded the Magazine Innovation Center in 2009 with the tagline, to amplify the future of print in a digital age. And everybody thought, this crazy guy, he's like so in love with print. He's swimming against the current. Print, what's that? The iPad is going to be the salvation of the industry, and everybody will be looking at the iPad and working with the iPad. Needless to say, the iPad is no longer the salvation of our industry. The smartphone is becoming the things that most folks read and get all their information on. I tell my students that texting has become the new talking, and reading has become the new listening. I mean, you can get a student, I can reach my students via text messages. I have 204 text messages from them after I asked them to go to a seminar because I was not there. And they have to send me a picture from the seminar and a brief statement, what they've learned from that seminar. So I have 204 text messages from them, although I only have 184 students. How did I get those? I have no idea. I'm hoping that some of these messages are not from my kids, since my daughter is giving birth tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock for our 6 grandkids. So before we start this presentation, I would like you to pay attention to this short video. It's like only 2 minutes and 14 seconds about the future of publishing and our industry. Take a look.
End of publishing and books are dead and boring. No longer can it be said that we like to read. My friends and I, we don't like the way books feel in our hands. It's not true that I don't follow trends. I know what I want when I see it, and packaging is more important than content. I have to tell you, my attention span is too small for big ideas. And it's just not true that I read a lot and I like learning. I don't care. And you should never think I've got to be concerned with environment and sustainability. What I really hope you get is you've got to open your eyes to my values. What's important to me is what Lady Gaga is wearing. And I don't really care all that much what Gandhi did last century. I think it's unbelievable that you're actually listening to us. What's important for you is you'll find customers for your products. You think your job's done if we like your brand. We'll do it for you on Facebook, on our mobiles, me and my friends. Your market is dying. Don't think it's all going to survive. It is the end of the publishing industry as we know it. Unless you reverse how you see me. It is going to survive. Don't think that it's all dying. Your market is me and my friends. On our mobiles, on Facebook, we'll do it for you. If we like your brand, your job's done. You'll think of products for your customers. You'll find what's important for you is that you're actually listening to us. I think it's unbelievable what Gandhi did last century. And I don't really care all that much what Lady Gaga is wearing. What's important to me is you've got to open your eyes to my values. What I really hope you get is I've got to be concerned with environment and sustainability. And you should never think I don't care. I read a lot and I like learning. And it's just not true that my attention span is too small for big ideas. I have to tell you, content is more important than packaging. I know what I want when I see it, and I don't follow trends. It's not true that we don't like the way books feel in our hands. My friends and I, we like to read. No longer can it be said that books are dead and boring, and this is the end of publishing.
I mean, it's one of the best videos I've ever seen in terms of, is it really the end of publishing or it's the beginning of publishing? And this is just an illustration of, in today's digital age, what you are bombarded with every 60 seconds. In 1 minute, we are having 243,000 Facebook posting. We are having X number of YouTube, 400,000 YouTubes posted every minute. It's estimated that if you want to watch all the YouTubes that are posted in 1 day, it will take you more than 4 years, constantly watching. So we are bombarded with information. I mean, information is coming to us any which way, anywhere you go. Not only that, we receive on an average, the average American adult receives 2,900 messages every single day. Somebody is trying to reach you in one way or the other. You pay attention to 52 and you remember only 4 at the end of the day. How can we make our message? How can we make sure that I am one of those 4 by the end of the day when you get my message? you know, there's nothing new. I mean, the problem we have, not only in this country, worldwide, that we forget our history. We have very short memories. Our institutional memory is short. So I dug back. I went to the Greek philosophers to talk about like print and digital. And yes, I know during the Greek philosophers, there was no such thing called digital. But this philosopher, Parmenides, said permanence is the only reality. What lasts and what is stable is real. So the only real thing in his philosophy was what you can actually see, what's documented. That's where we get the word document. From his ideas that to have anything real, it has to have a permanency. It has to be permanent. On the other hand, there was another Greek philosopher, Heraclitus. He said, you cannot step in the same river twice, which means that the water keeps on changing and nobody can cross the same river more than once. And so he theorized that change is the only constant. And so between what's permanent, print, whether you get your newspaper or magazine, you can change it, it's done. Or what changes constantly, digital. If I do a typo on my blog, I immediately just hit erase, boop, edit, it's fixed. If I have a typo in my magazine, guess what? It's going to be there forever and ever and ever. So how do we handle those two things and talk about the power of the magazine cover? I mean, we are bombarded with all that information. Yet, the two most important things to keep in mind, that our biggest competitors today are time and attention span. And by time, I don't mean the magazine. By time, I mean we have 24 hours a day. No new technology have been able to add a single second to the 24 hours a day. We still have the same amount of time. And our attention span is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So we have to deal with these things because everybody is trying to reach you. Everybody is going out of their way to send you a message. I mean, I think it was in New Orleans, even when you put your quarter in the parking meter, an ad comes on the meter. There's a message. They are selling you something or doing something. Our attention span dropped from 12 seconds. This is the average adult. We're not talking about kids. We're talking about adults. It dropped from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. Folks, that's 1 second more than a goldfish. That's why I tell my editors all the time. I mean, the one I consult with. I said, do you want to know how much your readers are going to pay attention to yourself? Buy a goldfish, put it in front of you, and see how much can you keep that goldfish attention. And the same thing is happening here. I mean, yeah, I'm very thankful you are all here. You're listening to me. And how many of you can actually raise their hand and say, like, Doc, in the last, 5 minutes you've been speaking, I did not think about anything else whatsoever except what you are telling us. I can't even raise my own hand because as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about other things. I mean, our attention span has become so limited that we have to start dealing with different things. I mean, so much change is taking place in our industry, in the magazine and the magazine industry. Even the way we cover presidents, which will lead us to the topic we are going to talk about. I mean, the way magazines today cover our president compared to the way magazines used to cover our president is changing. And I don't know how many of you remember those cigarettes, Eve cigarettes, like we've come a long way, baby, to die faster or slower or something. But those ads, we've come a long way since magazines dealt with covers and because those of you who remember the United States pre-television, magazines were the only internet of the country. I mean, the only way people in California, before television, and Texas, and Mississippi, and Missouri knew what's going on, it was the magazine. Newspapers were local. The radio was local. Magazines were the only national medium. And then came TV, then cable, then the internet, then streaming. All of a sudden, we changed from a melting pot to a cafeteria. All-you-can-eat buffet. You just go and grab, you like cheesecake, you can grab as many cheesecakes as you want. It's all you can eat. And what happened, it started fragmentation of the country. When cable television came to America in 1978, which is the same time I came to Texas, to Denton, all of a sudden, people moved from those 3 television channels to, you name it, you can have it, you can see it. And now with satellite and streaming and you name it, you can isolate yourself and eat of the same food that you like to eat over and over and over. In fact, one of the magazines I looked at when I was preparing for this presentation was TV Guide from 1964. And January TV Guide has summoned the 4 days that America was looking at television. 180 million people watched the funeral of John Kennedy on November 25. 180 million people. I mean, now even with our best television program, American Idol, 37 million people vote for that. Probably half of them repeat voters. So, I mean, and you can tell about how the country has become so fragmented when you have more people voting for American Idol than the President of the United States. Just think about it. So mass media today is like a stoplight. A stoplight where you have no earthly idea. Is it red? Is it yellow? Is it green? Can you imagine a stoplight with all the lights are working? The mass media 360 life is always like a green light. There's no stoppage. I mean, they are after you 24/7. I mean, it's like there's no stoppage. And I saw this on my Delta flight a few weeks ago. There's no stop, only go. That's exactly what's happening. So how do we deal with this then? That's why the print media is the stoplight. That's where the me time approach. That's why the magazine covers and magazines are still very important, because it gives you that escape from the 24/7, and you can say, this is my me time. This is the time I'm going to engage in this experience and start looking about what's going on. A magazine cover should grab your attention within 2.5 seconds. If you spend more than 2.5 seconds without being emotionally involved in the cover, smile, cry, pick it up, say like, wow, we've lost you. You are looking for another magazine cover. Because the cover is your billboard. It's like you go window shopping. That's the only thing you are going to see. It's what's on that cover. But that role of the cover has been changing. And it's changing in some cases for the worse, and in some cases for what's better. Why? Because in this digital age, the magazine cover is going to be the one that's going to stop you. Look some of the examples of some of the iconic covers. This is Ladies' Home Journal from February 1919. The war is just over. They decide to have the President of the United States during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, posing with the American flag with a quote about how we should now live in peace and harmony all together as one nation, united under God, etc., etc. Look, this is Ladies' Home Journal. It's a women's magazine that had the president. This is Gentleman's Quarterly in 1962. Look at the pose. It's so similar to the Abraham Lincoln. The editor of GQ in 1962 is saying, like, what a great honor that the President of the United States of America has accepted to pose for our cover and to introduce the two-piece suit instead of the three-button thing, like the two-button suit. I mean, it was like they went on and on saying, it's such a great honor for us to have the president on the cover. And then the Trump era started, and things changed. Now, is it that we as a country changing, or is it the editors changing, or is it what's going on here? Look at some of the covers. I mean, where are we from the 60s and some of the covers you are going to see later to those covers? or even even I'm ashamed to show this. But this is, can we sink any lower? And every time I say, like, this is as low as we can get, another sinkhole opens. And we keep on sinking deeper and deeper and deeper. But these are some of the iconic magazine covers that probably most of you remember. When you have National Lampoon, if you don't buy this magazine, we'll kill this dog. This magazine sold out. Not a single copy was left on the newsstand. Or if you remember the famous Time magazine cover, Is God Dead? I fought with my late brother, who was like 3 years ahead of me in school. In Lebanon, Time magazine was required reading for the seniors in high school. Can you imagine now what we require our seniors in high school? My son, when he was in high school, his required reading was The Old Man and the Sea. And I told him I was in 7th grade in Lebanon. English was my second language, and I had to read that book in 7th grade. But I didn't tell him how much I really hated that book, and when is this old man going to catch that fish? But I told him that was one of my favorite books. And the Rolling Stone cover, the iconic National Geographic cover, all of these are traditional covers. But that was yesterday. What about today? What are we doing in today's cover world? Well, before we do the presentation, I have this, like, some breaking news. There was a magazine called Trump that was launched in the 50s by Hugh Hefner. After he launched Playboy magazine, he decided his hands at a humor magazine. The magazine lasted like 3 issues, while Playboy went to become one of the largest selling magazines in the country back in the 70s. So we need all the help, or he needs all the help. I don't know, one of the two things that have to do with helping. So here are some recent magazine covers. These are Veep. I don't know how many of you watch Veep, or how many of you have Netflix. Is Veep a Netflix thing? I'm not a big television, but Veep must be a very important television series or Netflix series that Entertainment Weekly this week decided to have 12 covers with all the actors and actresses on the Time magazine. This is this week. Talking about impeachment. They are so funny. So there's the word peach in impeachment. Let's have the president as a peach. The Economist, the most serious news weekly we have. The UK is leaving Brexit, so, UK. Whatever. That's what they said, not me. Parents magazine. They were blasted they were in the news all over because they put a gay family on the cover. And people were saying, like, how dare you? And in fact, some of the reporters that called me and interviewed me, I said, like, this magazine is for parents from crib to college. If the country have legalized gay marriage, they owe it to the readers to cover all kinds of families. Why should we be like chained to the old and the past and what we do? People magazine, Luke Perry, he dies, he's on the cover. And remember, one of the eternal rules of magazine covers that sells, if you are a celebrity who die all of a sudden, at your prime, you will sell more covers than any other thing. When Frank Sinatra died, didn't sell anything because everybody knew, like, he was almost 100 years old, he's going to die. But when somebody in their young age dies, all of a sudden, they sell more copies and more magazines. Can Trump survive Mueller? That was just last Friday. Today we know the answer to that question. But look at the design and look at the two faces in the same picture. See, but again, a good magazine cover is that get a reaction from you. Whether it's an oh, a wow, a yuck, anything that create an emotional reaction, positive or negative, will later lead you to pick up that magazine and pick up a copy of that magazine. This is the president on the top of the White House, finished the wall. At the New Yorker magazine, he's blowing the sails. He's attacking egg-faced, total meltdown. Stormy. And they're not talking about the weather with this stormy, but just in case. I mean, it's Trump versus the law. I mean, I don't think you will ever find an editorial today saying, oh, how proud are we that we have President Trump on the cover of our magazine. I mean, it's a sad indictment for journalism. It's a sad indictment for our editors that we're no longer practicing journalism as we know it. I mean, I tell my students all the time that the minute you hear me voice an opinion, I remember my professor from Missouri in very first lecture back in 1980. He said, when a journalist tells you his or her opinion, he or she is no longer a journalist. I mean, I am the guy that when I go to vote, I wear 2 neckties, one with elephants and one with donkeys. I mean, I have both of them. I have a collection of 3,000 neckties, so I have to show off, and that's the only reason where people won't think I'm crazy wearing 2 neckties at the same time. But nobody will ever know my opinion, whether I am a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. It's nobody's business. All what I tell my students, I tell everybody, it's my duty to go vote, but nobody is supposed to know my vote. Otherwise, I won't be a journalist or a true journalist. But now we have, the Atlantic, impeach. Impeach who? This is one of the best covers I've seen in a long, long time dealing with Facebook. I mean, can you imagine just like 2 letters grabbing your attention and say like, wow. The wall won't end pot smuggling at the border. Legalization will. And yesterday I met somebody at the, maybe I should not say that. Somebody was from Colorado and he was like eating brownies that he brought with him. But at least he's not here. This is the famous Call Me Caitlin. I interviewed the publisher of Vanity Fair, and he said, Samir, look at the power of the cover. 2 weeks before this cover came out, Bruce Jenner / Caitlyn Jenner was interviewed by Andrea Mitchell on ABC News. A lot of people probably watched it, but then story is over. Vanity Fair worked on this cover, hired Annie Leibovitz, one of the top photographers in the country. They did not want this cover to leak, to anybody know about this cover. They moved their offices. They rented a small apartment in downtown New York just to create this magazine and this cover. And once this cover hit the newsstands, it had more coverage than, it's old news. 2 weeks ago, she was on ABC, on television. Yet when this cover hit, all of a sudden, people start calling her Caitlin. Vanity Fair did that before. That's one of the most iconic covers. And I remember when I was introduced to John Kennedy when he launched George Magazine. I was consulting for the company that actually launched George Magazine. And they introduced me to John, and he was introduced me to his staff and saying, like, this is Mr. Magazine. And I'm like, this is like John. It's like, and all of a sudden, his assistant comes to him and says, like, Demi Moore is on the phone. And for the life of me, I can never forget his answer. He looked at his assistant and said, like, I can't believe every time this woman takes off her clothes, she wants me to be there watching. and I told that to Esquire. Esquire is doing a story on John Kennedy's 20th anniversary of his death. And this cover generated more buzz, with the 3-year-old nursing on the cover of Time magazine. This was the highest selling issue of National Geographic. This is the face transplant. This teenager actually was in our church in Oxford, Mississippi, where she tried to commit suicide. And then National Geographic followed her story for almost 2 years. it was one of the most amazing stories to read about her trials and tribulations until she get the new face. Tell me anything digital in today's 24/7 world that will spend 2 years on one story to tell you the entire story. I mean, the art of storytelling, the art of engagement and experience maker is only available in things like this. Same thing, this is the cover of Time magazine that won the cover of the year. This is it's all about words and the lasting impact, and it's based on the Judge Kavanaugh. This is the most recent issue of Rolling Stone, the woman shaping our future, and the reminder that came yesterday from Bernie Sanders that there were like 60 or 70 new freshmen Democrats in Congress, not only 3, but those 3 are taken over. And of course, stoners have their own magazine now. In fact, there has been like 22 new magazines about marijuana and marijuana lifestyle, including the latest one that just came out, MJ Lifestyle. It's for women and marijuana. It's not just like for men, but it's like a very specific, and it's a companion to Kitchen Talk magazine, which is about cooking with cannabis. So, I mean, it's amazing what the print world can offer and provide you with things that you never think it existed. Again, this is this is of the school violence and the result of the school violence. I mean, just by watching your faces when you see a cover like that, this is exactly what editors, good editors, are trying to get you engaged in what the industry can do. He Must Be Born Again, relevant magazine. I think the movie Jesus that's coming out this Sunday or next Sunday on one of the channels. This is like part of that. Tonight at 8? Oh, it's on the History Channel. Oops, you are going to miss it because I still have another like 50, 60 slides. So, but the beauty of digital is you can tape it, DVR it, and then you can go back, watch it later tonight or something like that. So you won't take my word for it. I asked some of the editors and publishers about like, what's the role of the cover today? And we are not going to go like in details in all of these quotes, but this is Adam Moss. Adam just been inducted in the Editors Hall of Fame. He was the editor he's still the editor until the end of March of New York Magazine, one of the best magazines done in the country. And he told me, he said, Samir, the cover is now a brand statement. It's like when you go to Neiman Marcus and whatever they have in the window, I mean, you know that this is not the Dollar General store. I mean, this is like Neiman Marcus. And so it's a brand statement in this digital age that will need to differentiate you from everything in the social media. Edward Flesenthal, the editor-in-chief of Time, he said, Time covers are iconic. Each one tells a story by itself. Even if you don't read a single word, when you look at that cover, I mean, it's a story by itself. And that's the beauty of, can I be a storyteller from a visual image without even reading or seeing anything? And what does that cover that tells me? David Remnick, the editor-in-chief of The New Yorker, same thing. The covers are meant very much by themselves. I mean, The New Yorker is one of the few magazines that the cover picture or illustration has nothing to do with the inside of the magazine. I mean, every week they have an artist drawing something, and people, I mean, I remember from my professor's day, they used to cut the covers and frame them because they were considered like artwork. Amy Conway, the editor-in-chief of Health magazine, being on the cover of a magazine is such a power statement. I mean, between her and the editor of Entertainment Weekly and the editor of Time, they told me the first thing when they are interviewing, whether it's a political person, a celebrity, you name it, the first question they ask them, am I going to be on the cover of the magazine? Nobody will ever ask, am I going to be on your website? Am I going to be on your blog? Am I going to be on the cover of the magazine? That's the power of the cover. Roger Black, I mean, tells us, like, he's like the famous art director, that the covers, the good covers, are destined to be the poor man's coffee table book. That cover you want to display on your coffee table, you want to look at it over and over. And some of these covers are timely, yet they are timeless. And if we can reach that stage, that becomes very important. The editor-in-chief of the Atlantic, again, the covers like freezing a moment in time. We're no longer just talking about that rapid 24/7 news cycle, but it's just like stopping something and say, this is what we believe in, this is what we want to show you. Same thing with Sport Illustrated. He thinks about the cover as the original Mimi. And of course, I mean, I'm glad I teach 18-year-olds, so I know what a Mimi is. But if you don't know, see me after the presentation and we talk about Mimis and other stuff. Same thing with his editorial director, is that the cover of a magazine used to be a virtual monopoly. The only time a sports person will know that they arrived if they were on the cover of Sport Illustrated. Now, I mean, there's so many platforms, but still that cover is still a very coveted cover. Last but not least, Chris Mitchell, the publisher of Vanity Fair, where he was telling me that how the cover engaged all their platform. It's because of that cover on Vanity Fair of Caitlyn Jenner that the whole story went on their social media, on all the other platforms available. But we're not here to talk about that. The reason we are here tonight is to talk about President Kennedy and the magazine covers. Needless to say, President Kennedy and his family were the first royal family we had in the United States. I mean, between Joe Kennedy and between Jacqueline Kennedy, Joe the father and Jacqueline the wife, they knew and understood the mentality of the American mass media. Jacqueline Kennedy was a journalist, so she knew how to manipulate and how to work with the media. And Jack Kennedy, the President Kennedy, was the first television president. So people knew him. People had a more relationship with him, even they've never seen him. And as the museum will tell you, I mean, the first time they saw President Kennedy in color is when he was in town. Otherwise, all their knowledge about President Kennedy was black and white because we did not have color television back in the 60s. So, but that whole engagement with the royal family started in 1953. Just happened to be the year I was born, but I had nothing to do with it whatsoever. But the very first cover I could locate of the Kennedys was his courting. He was not yet married. He was courting, the young senator courting in 1953. And again, Jackie Kennedy being a journalist, and I firmly believe that she knew exactly how to manipulate the media, like somebody we know, and how to set the agenda that, I mean, you cannot convince me that the media and the reporters did not know what was going on inside the White House. Yet, the only pictures you've seen inside the White House are what Jackie wanted them to see. When she opened the gates, she changed the whole philosophy. He wrote an article, author Kennedy instead of Senator Kennedy, for Life magazine. Life magazine was in love with the Kennedys because Life magazine was also in love with the royal family. Life magazine was the only magazine to send a photographer for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953, and they had to develop the film on the plane coming back from London so they can publish the pictures in the magazine. Then the first baby is born, so here we have Caroline. When was the last time you saw the wife of the president in front and the president behind? It was Jacqueline Kennedy who was able to do stuff like that. The important about this royal family that very few people don't understand. If I tell you now, who were the two kids of the Kennedys? Caroline and John. Everybody knew that. Who were the kids of President and Michelle Obama? Can you name the kids of President Nixon? See, that's when we start hearing because they were so involved that they opened the doors, and everything you see, Norman Rockwell painting the president, That same image was used again when the president was assassinated. Newsweek, doing an election extra, 16 pages, that went sent to all the subscribers after the president was elected. Same thing Time magazine did, election extra. I mean, there was this fascination with this young president, the youngest president replacing the oldest president in office. I mean, so it was like Camelot in the making. It was like the royal family storytelling. I mean, the king is dead, long live the king. I mean, here's President Eisenhower, right? Yeah. just in case I'm messing up here. Same thing with the victorious young Kennedys, the christening of John. Sports Illustrated, it was the first and last, at least in my research, in my memory, first family that crossed across the genre of magazines. Sports magazine, men's magazines, women's magazines, you name it, they were always there. You don't see this anymore. You don't see, I mean, it's like way far and in between. But they were like regular, just tour. Look at the pictures on the walls and you will see, Mad Magazine, Saturday Evening Post, Time Magazine at the inauguration, Ebony Magazine, African American magazine. Before the president was assassinated, it was one of the few white people to be on the cover of Ebony Magazine, and mainly because also of the role President Kennedy played in the civil rights movement, in the appointment of an African American assistant press secretary. The New York Times, Life magazine. This is one of the famous pictures. Embraced by Mexico, hated at, I don't say it says, embattled at home. Then when he was selected Man of the Year, it was part of the style of Time magazine, and later you will know and you will hear that like Time magazine, when the president was assassinated, was the only magazine that did not put him on the cover. And my reasoning for that, my belief is that because both we had Time magazine and Reader Digest, both of them were founded by children of Presbyterian missionaries from China, Henry Luce and DeWitt Wallace. Both of them believed in America the Great, and both of them believed that we should not give anybody an opportunity to put down the country or to say anything negative about the country. Reader Digest never had, the last time they had an article critical of a president was in 1988, and the editor was fired because he criticized President Reagan. And Time magazine, Henry Luce wanted the 20th century to be America's century, not like the 20th century, not the capital century, but America's century. So that's my belief, that the reason they had President Johnson on the cover that day is just to show the world that America is continuing and nothing will stop us from being America the Great. But again, the cover of McCall's with the kids, Cosmopolitan, the Kennedys on the cover of Cosmopolitans, next to like 20 different ways to do you know what. The Post. This one of the most iconic issues of the magazine. First, it was launched on the regular time, and it was the first time in their history Life magazine replaced the red logo with the black logo. TV Guide devoted a whole section of the magazine about the 4 days. Minute by minute, they documented all the television programs, everything that took place on those 4 days, from his assassination to his funeral. Newsweek had him when he was assassinated. Look magazine had the memories. Life. Jet magazine, the African American celebrity magazine that was published by John Johnson. First time in their entire history. And if anyone is familiar with Jet magazine, they know that they have a page called Black Beauty, just like sort of like a pin-up girl. That was the only issue in the entire history of Jet that did not have the pin-up girl. It was all devoted to John Kennedy. Remember that picture when he was elected? The difference is the Saturday Evening Post had the same picture, Norman Rockwell, but with the black border. Look magazine in memory of John F. Kennedy, but if you really peel that sticker, it was a sticker added to the cover of the magazine. It's like inside the Christmas at the White House. And they just changed it to read the in memory of John F. Kennedy. And of course, Jackie continued. Photoplay, even a photography magazine had Jackie with the kids. I mean, she was a master of dealing with the media and letting the media inside whenever she wants them on her own terms and continue. Then we have the Warren Report, then we have the New York Times Magazine, the JFK Memorial issue, his word, the special issue, 1,000 Days, the 4-part series that was published. This is the Life International, which was one of the rare images taken by a friend, published on the cover, never appeared on any of the American covers, but that was the cover from Life International by a member of his own team. The stories, the books written about Kennedy, the Chicago Tribune tribute to John F. Kennedy, the last of the series of the 4,000 Days, Matter of Reasonable Doubt, the Warren Report. This one, Life magazine, 2 weeks after they published the issue, they decided, let's have one issue with no advertising, just nothing, everything we published about President Kennedy. For the first time in the history of American magazine. This is in 1963. This magazine went to press 3 times. They sold out the very first time, they sold out a second time, they sold out a third time. Not only that, they have reprinted the magazine in 1988, sold out. They reprinted the magazine in 2003 and sold out. So this is one of the few instances where the same magazine was like printed over and over and over because it has this timely yet timeless story. And one of the things that I really believe that the reason the Kennedys are the only American president family that continues till this day and age is because we've never had a complete answer to the question. I mean, it's like sort of like the story is becoming like a soap opera. I mean, that's why you will see a lot of conspiracy theories. I mean, if you look at that magazine over there, like, what if and I just saw another magazine yesterday coming up from the UK. What if the president was not assassinated? And so this, as long as we don't have a final answer, we are going to continue to see a lot of the magazines. And look at this. Look at the iconic aspect and the way those 3 leaders were treated. And I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say like, I don't want just for you to live a reminisce of like what the way it used to be, as Walter Cronkite would say, but he's eating an ice cream on the cover of Esquire. I mean, it's just like he's like any average Joe Smith, like on his boat and eating an ice cream. Same famous picture came back in the 70s. TV Guide remembered all again, Jackie on the front. The entire family when they did the movie about the first family. The iconic issue back in 1988. In 1991, JFK, Why Do We Still Care? In 2003, the 40th anniversary reprint edition. Of course, it's no longer 50 cents. I mean, now we are talking about $6 comparing to the 50 cents. The day Kennedy died, which I think Nicola told me that was sponsored also by the museum. So you had, and then this is the latest one that just came out in a second edition, JFK and the remarkable life and tragic death of an American icon. I mean, the media have reached a stage where you don't need an excuse to publish something about the Kennedys. And because every time you put the Kennedys, they are selling as well as we had with Princess Diane. I mean, Princess Diane was the second royalty that sold more magazines and helped the magazine industry as much as the Kennedys. So that's the only equivalent. And even with all the popularity of President Obama and Michelle Obama, again, they did not cross the genre of magazines. They were not as both of them together. We've seen Michelle Obama a lot of magazine, especially lately, on a lot of magazine covers, but we've not seen the same relationship the media had with the Kennedys and the family. So here you have it from 1953 until 2019. The royal affair between the Kennedys and the magazines continue. And thank you. And I think that's all what I have to say about the magazine covers.
If you have questions, please pass them forward. Okay. There's a JFK parody cover in this exhibit, National Lampoon 1977. When did it become okay to poke fun at President Kennedy and or assassination?
Well, let's put it this way. There was a cover of Newsweek magazine when Tina Brown, one of the most celebrated editors we have in this country, about Princess Diane. Like, what if she lived, she would have like been 40 or 50 or something like that. And it was along the lines of that National Lampoon cover. It was, I mean, even if you look at the cover, we were, I mean, remember, we are the 60s and the 70s, the age of social change, the age of rebellion, the age of, still, I mean, if you look at the cover, it was tastefully done, unlike like throwing a pie on the face of the president. But it was the whole idea that said, okay, how can we celebrate the anniversary of the inauguration, even if the president was not there? So prior to digital manipulations, I mean, it was the illustrators who did those covers. I still remember one National Lampoon cover was President Nixon, where his nose was like so long after the Watergate. And so it was always okay to poke fun at political figures. That's the whole birth of the cartoons. And National Lampoon was more of a cartoon illustration magazine than just like a serious magazine.
This is interesting. What is the reasoning behind using color images of John F. Kennedy as opposed to black and white? Is there a symbolic difference?
Technology. When we are able now to create things in color, I mean, if you notice, both covers of Time and Newsweek after his elections were black and white. Because if we wanted to have a color picture back then, it will take us like 2 weeks to do the color separation, and probably a lot of you have no idea what I'm talking about, but we used to like have to send the picture to a special processing place where they separate the colors to the 4 basic colors, and it used to take, I mean, I remember working at a music magazine in Lebanon in the early 70s. It used to take us 2 weeks to get that image processed. Now, I mean, just like with a click, I mean, boom, and you get the color picture. So it has nothing to do with like, oh, this is a cautious effort, like, you know, let me use a black and white picture. It was just based on the technology and what was available for us.
I'm surprised by all the 1991 covers about Oliver Stone's movie, yet every single one uses the real JFK, nothing from the film. Why?
When you have the real thing, why do you want a substitute? I mean, it's like, it reminds me of the ad that we always hear, like, it tastes like butter, it smells like butter, it feels like butter, but it ain't butter. Why would I need it if I have butter?
Of the covers on display here, which is your favorite, least favorite, and most emotional?
Well, I'm going to give you my typical answer to this question.
Okay.
I do not differentiate among my children. So if it's a magazine, I mean, I treat all the magazines equally. And I mean, there are some powerful covers. There are some not so powerful covers. But again, I mean, any of these covers that evoke some kind of emotion in you. I mean, some people get more emotional about a cover that they can remember or relate to. Some may be surprised about some of the covers, but at the end of the day, I mean, to me, it's all good because it's magazines.
Okay, well, if you can answer this, then you're truly brilliant. Who do you think shot JFK and why?
I know one thing for sure. I did not do it. I was not even here. Lee Harvey Oswald. And why? Who knows? The guy is dead. And the guy that killed him is dead. So, which is good for the magazine business, because as long as we don't have an answer, we keep on selling magazines and more magazines and more magazines. I mean, it's really a soap opera. I mean, what's the definition of a soap opera? The story that never ends. And this is the story that will never end. I mean, it's like from one generation to the other. I mean, today at the museum, I was stunned seeing those young kids. I mean, and if you look, and I was just watching the impressions on their face, just listening to the audio, watching some of this stuff. I mean, as long as we keep on the memory alive, I mean, that's one thing I always tell people when they lose a dear one. I said, as long as you keep their memories alive, they will continue to be with us. And the same thing is happening with the Kennedys.
This might be one for the curators. Why no Time magazines in this show? Why no Time magazines
It's
in
over
this
there.
show?
I see one.
Oh, okay. There is one. Okay. Okay, well, this is a good one. How many magazines do you subscribe to?
Let's put it this way. Are we on the record here? I think last year, what I claimed in tax deductions and I had receipts for was like $28,000 and some change. And this year, I don't dare say, because I'm like terrified if my wife knows how much I spend like buying magazines on eBay, I'll be in really, really a lot of trouble.
Do they come to your house or to your office?
I have 3 P.O. boxes. I have like my house address, that the magazine that I want my wife to see, they come. I rent a P.O. box for the stuff that I don't want my wife, whether it's a necktie or a magazine or something that goes to that P.O. box. And then I have my email at the office. I mean, my regular mail that comes to the university. But like you said, I mean, I have 6 storage areas. I've confiscated the attic at the School of Journalism. I mean, I pay in storage more than I pay for mortgage on my house, on those, because they have to be heated and cooled. And if the JFK Museum, if you want them, I mean, I'm willing to donate all my magazines, all 30,000 plus magazines, for anybody who's willing to house them, create a magazine. I mean, magazines to me are the best reflectors of popular culture. I mean, to know really what happened in this country, going as far as 1741, when the first magazine was started, all the way to 2019. Yeah, I think we're 2019. It's just, I can tell you exactly year by year what was trending in America's pop culture and life and society as a whole.
How much time a day do you spend reading magazines?
Again, bringing my wife here to the picture. She will tell you, don't ask Samir anything. If it's outside the magazines, don't even ask him. Which is a great excuse then, like if she asks me about like helping pruning the trees or doing the lawn or something like that, I don't know how to do that. It's not a magazine. But I have no other life. I mean, it's except when I'm reading or trying to convince. I mean, I've called all my grandkids like Mr. Magazine Jr., Mr. Magazine the Third, Miss Magazine, Miss Princess Magazine. I mean, just like trying to brainwash them at a younger age when they still listen to you than my adult kids.
If the same thing happened today, would it be covered the same way?
You mean we won't see some cover saying like Hallelujah or? I don't know. It's media have changed so drastically But again, I mean, any assassination, if that does not stop the country, if that does not stop the media and make us think, uh, I mean, yes, some of those covers I showed are great, very creative, but really, I mean, is this how we treat the office of the President of the United States? And I think that's the big difference between what's happening now and what happened back in the 60s. I mean, that reverence around the office. I mean, you cannot convince me that most of the media folks did not know about all the escapades of President Kennedy and all what's happening and all what was taking place. But they elected not to touch it. And they just covered whatever Mrs. Kennedy ushered them into and asked them to cover. We were just talking a little bit earlier. I mean, we have the most beautiful First Lady ever. And she was in all kinds of magazines before she married the president and before. When was the last time you saw her on the cover of a magazine? I mean, she speaks how many languages? I mean, yet, whether it's her choice or the media choice, but I mean, I was like saddened to see like a brand new magazine hit on the newsstand about the first ladies. And I mean, this is like 2019. She's the first lady. Yet her picture was a tiny picture in the background with all some of the first ladies that are taking the front and center. I mean, it's a shame, but it's again, will she sell magazine if she's on the cover? I can guarantee you she will sell magazines. I told NBC News, I said the only reason Melania Trump is not on the cover of magazines is because of the politics and because she's Mrs. Trump and nothing else that keeps her out of the magazine covers.
How many magazine covers has JFK or Jackie been featured on?
Where's the curator? Steve, where are you? I really don't know the answer to that question. It's just
Okay.
like I've lost count after like 100 titles that I bought on eBay.
Do you think Obama covers sold less because of digital media or their race or some other factor?
The Obamas were good magazine cover sellers. I mean, Michelle Obama sold more magazines than Barack Obama. The rash of magazines and newspapers that sold out the first time he was elected president is because of the collectability factor. People thinking that he's the first African-American president, those magazines will be collector's items, they will have a higher value there. So we almost sold out. I mean, even newspapers went back to a second printing and a third printing. What people don't understand today is every time you see any magazine or a newspaper telling you this is a special collector's edition, means they are bombarded the market with it, and its value is not going to increase anywhere. All the magazines that have gained value over the years are the magazines that nobody ever knew they were going to be collectible items or very important, or I mean, look at the first issue of Superman, like sold for what, $1.3 million? I mean, here's something for 10 cents. And it never had on it collector's item, special collector's edition. But we are suckers in this country for anytime you tell me collectors and free. I mean, I work with some magazines where we tell you like free poster inside, but then we hike the price $2 on the newsstand. And you still, you pay, I mean, we see like 20% sales increases because you are getting something free, although you are paying $2 more for that freebie.
What does the future of print magazines look like?
Besides being bright and excellent, I will tell you that only two people can tell you the future, God and a fool. I know I'm not God, so here comes the prediction from the fool. As long as we have human beings, we are going to have print magazines. Human beings thrive on three ships that cruise through all human beings: ownership, showmanship, and membership. We all love to own things. I mean, if you watch any baby being born, they are born with their fists tight. I mean, they want to capture everything in this world. And then when we leave with like open hands. Yet, that period, as a human being, we want to collect, we want to own things. And like I tell my students all the time, I mean, having a virtual girlfriend or a virtual boyfriend, it ain't the same thing as having a real girlfriend or a real boyfriend. I mean, the benefits are completely different. And the same thing with the sense of ownership of the magazine. And then that sense of showmanship. I mean, if I'm reading War and Peace on the plane, or I'm reading The Economist, I want that person sitting next to me say like, wow, this is an intellectual person. Look what he's reading. If I'm reading something I don't want people to see me reading, then I look at the iPad. But that idea of showmanship is very important. And then the membership. I mean, the feeling that there's like 1 million people engaging in the same exact experience at the same time that I'm engaged in makes me, in this age, which I refer to as the isolated connectivity. I mean, we feel we are so connected, yet we are more isolated than ever before. I mean, one of my kids one time, that's when I coined the phrase isolated connectivity, on a Friday night, watching a movie and text messaging. And I said, what are you doing? He said, Dad, can't you see I'm watching a movie? I said, I know that. Whom are you text messaging? My girlfriend. What is she doing? She's watching the same movie at her apartment. And they were talking about the movie. I said, what happened about the old-fashioned days? You take your girlfriend to the movies, you buy some popcorn, you pretend you're reaching to the popcorn, and you miss. And he looked at me and said, like, where are you from? We cannot talk. We cannot talk about the movie at the theater. I mean, I said, it's like we cannot talk at the movie theater about the movie. It's just like.
Of all of the covers you've seen, what is your most serious cover, most entertaining cover, most disgusting cover?
From the Kennedy covers or from?
I don't know. All the covers
All
in
the
the
covers?
world. Yeah.
You know the cover was Demi Moore,
Yeah.
which was the first time showing a pregnant woman naked on a cover of a magazine, was actually received as a very, very positive because, again, of the glorious status of a pregnant woman and the art it was presented in. Bad covers, I mean, I don't think we have time tonight to list all the covers that, but some of the covers that you will never forget, I mean, that Is God Dead, that cover of Time magazine from the 60s. And the reason I remember it, and it has been replicated a lot, I mean, so many other magazines tried to steal that design. But I think I was in 9th grade when that cover came out. And just like the only reason I remember it so much is fighting with my brother. I mean, I was the church kid, he was not. And I wanted to read, Is really God dead? And,
in light of the modern culture's attitudes against sexual harassment and treatment of women, for example, the Me Too movement, why does the modern media ignore Kennedy's sexual history and still treat him so positively?
mainly for one simple reason. Like it or not, when somebody dies, you only remember the good things about them. I mean, when the media had the opportunity to criticize the president, it was when he was alive. Once he died, and even like Stephen, the curator, and I were talking about, even if you look at the way the president was portrayed after he died, he is no longer looking at you eye to eye. He is looking either up. All the pictures where, he became that larger-than-life figure. And with the exception of few publications, and books that by his secretary and other folks, nobody is going to touch that legacy. And that's why I say, it's I mean, in soap operas, the hero is always a hero, and he's the hero. So,
If magazines become obsolete in this digital age, similar to a cashless world, where do you see iconic and long-lasting images going in the next 20 years?
well, to start with, it's not a cashless world. I still have cash. Heck, I mean, if I want to buy something that nobody knows I'm buying, I'm not going to give them my credit card. So I always carry cash with me. I mean, it's like, magazines will never be obsolete. So the question is a hypothetical question. I mean, they said magazines were dead when people invented the car. They said, oh, people are not going to ride cars. Instead of reading magazines for leisure, they are going to take trips. When radio came, said, oh, nobody's going to look at magazines. When television came, it's the change, the beauty of the magazines, and the reason they survive is their continuous change of the magazines. I mean, the magazines today are nothing similar to what magazines used to be in the 50s or in the 30s or even in the 20s. I mean, I just did a presentation at the American Magazine Media Conference about the magazines from 1919 because they were celebrating the 100th anniversary of the of the Magazine Publishers of America, the MPA. And I looked at all the magazines of 1919. I mean, it's amazing the depth of the coverage and the information. People did not know what was going in America unless they received the magazine. That's why I call them the internet of that era. But now, I mean, if you look at the magazines, I mean, you have magazines for red hair, blonde hair, yellow hair, purple hair. I mean, you take any part of the chicken and you have a magazine just devoted to that part, whether it's the wings or the legs or the breast. I mean, as opposed to like where you used to have a food magazine and you will get a recipe or two about chicken.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much.